Hey guys, Dan here with today's quarantine video. It's this week's TV news and reviews. Not a lot in the news right now because, of course, coronavirus stuff taking over. We've kind of already talked about how networks are treating things differently and how the ratings are up overall for all day parts. There's a couple things, though, I do want to mention. First of all, we do have some renewals and cancellations. Now, most of these will be done at the upfronts in a couple weeks for the major networks. A lot of them probably are not quite sure what their fall schedules will look like, but pilot season has been shut down, and so they are sort of bypassing that, and in many cases just buying up the pilots or the series actually without even making a pilot, just seeing some scripts. So, but we do have a couple of renewals and cancellations for you. Fox has renewed 911 and the spin-off 911 Lone Star. These are big shows for the network. In fact, 911 is, I think, the network's #1 scripted program. #1 overall, I believe, remains The Masked Singer, but 911 is doing great. It gets about 15 million viewers a week, and that's both live and from the 7-day on-demand views. Same with Lone Star does, not quite the same numbers, but it's also up there. It gets double digits every week. I think the average is somewhere around 12 million. So those were sort of obvious pickups. CBS has given the axe to God Friended Me after 2 seasons. Now, I have not watched the second season yet. I just finished the first season up maybe a month ago, and I liked it. I mean, it was sort of junk foody. It was silly. I mean, it's not a comedy, it's a drama, so it's not silly in that regard, but it's just got that trademark CBS sort of feel-good vibe to it that they've been doing for the last 20, 25 years. Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman and Judging Amy and Joan of Arcadia. So this, falls in line with all of those kinds of shows. But it is, good family viewing. And here's how good CBS has it over there. This thing got almost 8 million viewers on average every episode, and CBS still gave it the heave-ho. NBC, ABC, Fox, these networks would give their eye teeth to have an 8 million viewer show. But, CBS remains pretty constant in the ratings because most of their viewers are older, so they have actual live TV sets. Most people my age and younger are watching things on Hulu after the fact, or even CBS All Access, to name a CBS format. But God Friended Me, not good enough to make the cut, so that will not be getting a season 3. Now, from what I've read, the producers had enough notice that the program will wrap up with no loose ends or anything. So that's nice. I always like to see that. Even if a show is only 2 years old, it's nice to have a perfect, finale there. Other than that, though, yes, numbers are up everywhere, of course. The Modern Family series finale, that was from season 11, that aired last week, to the show's best number since January of 2017. So a nice way to go out on top for them. They will end this season as ABC's #1 comedy overall. And The Conners is #2, but #1 in the coveted 18 to 49 demo. So The Conners, I assume, will take over that #1 spot next year once Modern Family is off the air. Also, the Grey's Anatomy finale got the highest ratings of the season for that show. However, there would have been 4 more episodes coming if the shutdown didn't happen, so they ended a little premature. Speaking of which, ABC is moving up some of its summer slate. They have a whole host of the game shows that air every summer that are going to start now in May instead of June. That is Press Your Luck with Elizabeth Banks, the new version of Match Game with Alec Baldwin, To Tell the Truth with Anthony Anderson, and Holy Moly, which is a golf contest show. I didn't watch it last season when it premiered, but that's coming back for season 2, and it's, I guess, like miniature golf, like putting and stuff. I don't know. I think does Fred Savage maybe have something to do with that? I don't remember. But Holy Moly is the name of the show, so that will be back as well. And they're also moving up the last season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That was supposed to be, I don't know if that was going to air in the summer or if they were going to air it in the fall, but in any event, it is moving up to start in May as well. So ABC has some good things in the works then for the summer. And American Idol has decided to move ahead with their live shows. That was sort of a big what if, because shows like American Idol and America's Got Talent sort of thrive in that live audience condition once they get to the live shows, and then people call and vote for their favorites, or I guess more likely these days they text for their favorites. But they didn't know what they were going to do because they had already gone through most of the auditions, well, all of the auditions, and then most of the tryouts and stuff in, I guess, Hollywood Week, if they still call it that. I haven't watched American Idol in probably 10 years. I mean, it was Lead to Wise maybe was the last season. That was probably season 11 or something. But it's been a while for sure. But I will be intrigued, actually. I might at least pop in and see how they're doing this, because basically they're having all 20 finalists perform live from their homes, and then the judges will be, virtual as well, and then Ryan Seacrest will be tying it all together as always, but he'll be from his home as well. So it'll be interesting because, of course, these people mostly sing to a backing track on when it gets to the competition. They audition in a cappella, but it's a backing track on the show. So I don't know if producers are going to have musicians do their song and then, email them or whatever virtually the instrumental, and they can upload it and then do it while they perform. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think that starts not this coming weekend, but the weekend after. So I actually will kind of tune in on that. I haven't watched American Idol in so long, and not like I'm going to know any of these competitors anyway, but it'll be interesting to see, I think. So that's pretty much all for the news. Not a ton going on that isn't, stuff we've already been told. Ratings are up. Productions have been shut down, et cetera, et cetera. So let's get to 6 new shows. I try to give you 6 every week, and this one actually has 2 shows that bypassed me somehow. They both came out the second week of January this year on major networks, one on NBC and one on CBS. I didn't know these shows existed somehow, and I had a commercial on Hulu for this NBC show, Lincoln Rhyme, The Hunt for the Bone Collector, and they were like, catch up now on Hulu and watch all the episodes for the season. And I was like, what season? What is happening with this show? And of course, I know what The Bone Collector is. That was a Denzel and Angelina Jolie movie back about 20 years ago. I never saw it, but I know vaguely what it is. And this follows the same, essentially from the same books and the same storyline. And then the other one is CBS's FBI Most Wanted. This is a spinoff of their show FBI, and this time it stars Julian McMahon and Kellen Lutz, and that's over on CBS. So those are 2 shows I completely missed, but I saw the first episodes of today, so I can tell you about them. Also, we have 3 new shows on Netflix. They're always bringing the heat over there, and then 1 new kids show on Nickelodeon. So let's start with Lincoln Rhyme, Hunt for the Bone Collector. Now, the season is all done, so you can catch, like I just said, the whole season now is up on Hulu, and I assume the NBC... Well, I don't know if NBC's app works anymore now that they're doing the Peacock app, which, by the way, if you have Comcast, I think yesterday was the first day you could do the Peacock free trial or whatever. Comcast customers are getting a sneak peek. I don't know if any of the original content is up on there yet, any of the new series, but it will at least have, The Office and Parks and Rec and all this kind of thing, for now anyway. But that's for Comcast customers only. But anyway, let's talk about Lincoln Rhyme, Hunt for the Bone Collector. Like I said, it is based on the popular book series. And here we have NYPD officer Amanda Sachs, who is played by Ariel Kebbel, and she's basically a rookie officer. And it follows her being a partner with this disabled forensic expert, Lincoln Rhyme. And he's played by Russell Hornsby, who you might know from The Affair or Grimm. He's been on a few different things. I sort of recognize him, but I haven't watched any of those shows, so I think it's more from promos and stuff. But anyway, she teams up with him and his team to solve the cases in pursuit of this serial killer, the Bone Collector, who essentially made Lincoln Rhyme paralyzed in the first place. So in the first episode, we meet him, we see him get paralyzed, we meet her, we see them team up. This show is all over the place. Now, I will say this first and foremost because it also goes into the FBI Most Wanted thing on CBS. I don't typically watch these procedural type shows. I don't really like them. They're okay, but some of them I like. Like I like Magnum PI's remake on CBS. I watched the MacGyver remake for a little bit, also on CBS. But for the most part, these shows are all like okay. Every episode's basically the same. We're seeing the same types of people, the same types of murders, X, Y, and Z. This one seems a little bit more focused because we are dealing specifically with looking for the bone collector. But just in this first episode, we have 3 different murders and 3 different cases to solve. And there's no like clear cut, okay, like this is the premise of things. Like everything is just thrown at you all at once, and therefore we don't really get to know anybody. I mean, we know what Lincoln's been through because we see it in the first scene, but we don't know anything after that. We know he's, kind of curmudgeonly, and he's fired a bunch of his aides. So now he just has one nurse that is basically his, number one trusted confidant. And then she comes in, and she's got a little bit of a history, and we find out that she's got PTSD. So we find out a little bit about her too, but mostly because there's so much going on, we don't focus on much of anything for very long. We don't focus on the characters for sure, which isn't the worst thing in one of these procedurals, but at the same time, we don't really devote any time that's proper to the cases either because there's so many of them. There's some interesting things going on here. I like the way that Lincoln's room is sort of set up with the virtual screens and everything, and I like the way he can identify things visually since he is he's not even a paraplegic. I believe it's called a tetraplegic. And so, I like that sort of aspect to it. It makes it a little different, but that's pretty much the only thing. Plus, he gives a good performance. But everything else is very by the book here. Nothing new, nothing original. But if you're fans of these types of books and the book series specifically for the Bone Collector, I would imagine you'll probably like this more than I did. I mean, I would like it if it was sort of a fugitive type setup where they're really only going after one person, but they haven't really set it up that way. Like these two are pairing, and they obviously want to get the Bone Collector, but they're going to be sort of sidetracked at every pass, I think, with other cases. And I don't know, I feel like maybe it would set itself aside a little bit more if they did like a fugitive type thing with it and made one case, go throughout. And I imagine by the end of the season they don't catch him, otherwise you don't have a show anymore. So, like the fugitive, it keeps going and going. So, I feel like that would be a more interesting route for them to go, for it to be less generic. But for what it is, it's all right. I don't think I'll continue watching it. But again, procedurals aren't really much my thing anyway. But I'll leave Lincoln Rhyme, The Hunt for the Bone Collector, with a C+. It's okay. So up next we go to the other one. I didn't know about this. Came out as well in January. And this actually has 3 episodes, I think, left. I think it will end its run for the season on the 28th of April. Yeah, so there's still I guess there's just 1 episode left, but it will be on April 28th. So next week they won't have a new one. But so if you're want to get into the show, then there you go. They've already done a crossover with the original FBI show a couple weeks ago, and then also really the pilot for this was an episode of FBI last season, and that show also is pretty new. FBI itself has only been on for a year, but I guess it was successful enough. And it's Dick Wolf. He does all the Law and Order shows. He does the Chicago shows on NBC. So when CBS struck gold with the FBI, they were like, well, let's keep the Dick Wolf money machine going and add another one. So this is FBI Most Wanted, and like I said earlier, it stars Julian McMahon and Kellen Lutz, and essentially, this is going into more specific cases on the Most Wanted list, whereas I guess the original FBI just does regular cases. But here we're looking at really the Most Wanted here. Keisha Castle Hughes is the female in this show, and I don't know much about her, but I remember the name because she was nominated for a lot of things. I think, including an Oscar for the movie Whale Rider years and years ago when she was just a girl. But this is, when I say a standard procedural by Dick Wolf, I mean this is what all the Law and Orders are, and this is, even the non-Dick Wolf shows, the Criminal Minds and Without a Trace and CSI, and they all are kind of the same. This one though, I think takes it to another level because it's just not interesting. The camera shots are all over the place. They try to do this like Steadicam or Handycam kind of thing, but every scene is just like shaking, and it's not crazy shaking like in a horror movie, like a found footage movie, but it's just it's just as jarring. Like can you just set the camera for one scene on a freaking tripod so we don't have to feel like we're in the room with all the FBI. Like, so that's number one. The acting is, I think, average at best. I mean, the best one here is probably Julian McMahon. Kellen Lutz is just not that good of an actor to begin with. I mean, I've seen him in one of the Twilight movies. I think he was in the one that I saw, and then I've seen him kind of pop up in other things, and they tried to make him an action star for a little bit. Hollywood did, but that failed. So he can't really act that well. And they're also copying that classic like Aaron Sorkin walk and talk thing that Sorkin kind of perfected with The West Wing and Sports Night, that Dick Wolf is sort of carrying the torch for his shows now. But that, as well as like every single scene, they're walking and talking. Nobody's really even stopping to look at the evidence. They're just busy talking about the evidence. Um, you know, so what's good about this? I mean, I suppose the murder was interesting that they're dealing with, but I watched this after the Lincoln Rhyme show, and I could definitely come up with scenes in my mind from the Lincoln Rhyme show more than I could for this. Like, absolutely. At least, that had a better storyline, even though it was all over the place and, 3 different murders and stuff, it still had a better storyline than this does. The acting is better in that as well. This is, like I said, it's average, Julian McMahon being the best one of all of them. I mean, I guess maybe if you like the whole procedural thing and you watch all of them, you'll get something out of this, but I feel like there's a lot better ones on the air than this, so you shouldn't really have to. I mean, there's, just in the Law and Order franchise alone, there's, I don't know, 45 probably seasons of different iterations of that show that you could watch that'll be better than this. We also don't know the characters at all. I know that's not really the point of these procedural shows. They're more about the cases themselves, and we learn just little inklet drops about the person, as we go through the years on the shows. But even for a run-of-the-mill procedural, I think this one misses the mark. So I give FBI Most Wanted a C minus. All right, so let's go over to Netflix. We've got 3 shows on there, and they're all kind of different. One is a mini series that I'm going to talk about first, and then there's 2 comedies. One is like your standard family sitcom, and then there's a single camera setup comedy as well. So first up is Unorthodox. This is a 4-part miniseries, and just like Self-Made that I talked about last week with Octavia Spencer, this is 4 quick episodes. I mean, they're all between 48 and 52 minutes. And I love that Netflix is doing this, finally realizing that, they don't have to do 8 hours or 10 hours to get the point across. And as a result, I think these shows are tighter because of it. So it's based on a biography book, and the premise is a 19-year-old Jewish woman named Esty runs away from her very Orthodox community in Brooklyn to find her real mother in Germany, in Berlin, and basically attempts to ingratiate herself with a quote-unquote normal life away from the community. At the same time, we also learn that she is pregnant. So her husband wants to travel to Berlin with his cousin to try and find her and figure out what's going on. So in the first episode, the guys are all still in New York. We don't see them quite yet make the trek to Berlin, but she has made it there. She has found her mom. And one thing that's very interesting about this show, and we talked about this, I forget the name of the show because I watch so many of these shows, but it is on Netflix, and it was South African, and they did all these different South African dialects. It was like a badass woman superhero type show. She's not an actual superhero, but it's like, one of those. It reminded me a lot of Colombiana. I remember that, but I forget the name of it. But this is in that same vein in that it's very authentic to the languages. There's Yiddish here, there's English, and then there's also German. And all languages are represented as they would be, in the real world. And I love that Netflix is doing that. I don't know if, this has probably been in the works for a while, so it probably didn't have anything to do with it, but I wonder how much effect like a movie like Parasite has, the first foreign language film to ever win Best Picture, in, telling Hollywood and telling different studios that, people will read a movie or a TV show if you make it compelling enough, you make it good enough. So I was very glad to see that they wanted to be authentic here to the characters. The lead, this Esty woman, Shira Haas, is her name, and I don't know her, but she won an Israeli Academy Award for a movie called Noble Savage. I don't recognize her, but she's great here. I mean, she holds this whole thing together. But really, everybody is doing a great job. I think the script is great here. This first episode was about 48 minutes. I thought this flew by. This went a lot quicker than a lot of the half-hour episodes I watched for this week's show. Everything's very tight, and that's what you get with these 4-part miniseries on Netflix as opposed to 8 parts, 10 parts, even 6 parts. It's it's too long if you don't have the story to tell. I mean, it was one of my problems with Tiger King. I don't think those all needed to be, I think it's 7 episodes total of that. You could have cut them down to 40-minute episodes instead of 50-minute episodes, for example. But here we've got, a tight 48 minutes, and you get everything right away. You know these people within a couple of scenes. And, it's a little bit stereotypical, but I think, the reason, especially for, like, Jewish families, Italian families, there's certain cultures and sects where it is like, okay, well, there's a reason for these stereotypes. So it's like, even though you have never met these people, you do kind of know them. And, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I felt the same way with Bohemian Rhapsody, for example, with Freddie Mercury's family, or The Big Sick with Camille Nanjiani's family, his character's family. Like, there's just certain cultures that have, certain stereotypes that are there for a reason because they know a lot of people like that. And it's the reason, so many sitcom characters actually resonate. Like, I think of Marie Barone from Everybody Loves Raymond, like classic Italian mom, and so here we get this, classic Orthodox Jewish family, and so even though we've never met them specifically, we sort of know their plight and we know kind of what they're thinking and how they feel right away, and then we get the nuances as the show progresses, because obviously everybody is different, but that initial rush, we don't have to spend 20 minutes dealing with, okay, well, here's who this family is, and here's what they're doing, and here's, this and that. We get it immediately from things that we already know about the culture. So I think that is great that we don't spend too much time. Everything is bing, bang, boom, and I am really excited to see the rest of this, just like the Self-Made Show. It seems very easily bingeable. We're all looking for things to binge here. I don't really have a negative about this show. I mean, I think it's very well done. Certainly in this first episode, I'm interested to see what her experience is going to be with her mother in Germany. They've just sort of met, towards the end of this episode, and I'm very interested to see where the plot line goes with, the pregnancy and stuff. And then these guys going to Germany to find her. if this were a movie, it seems like it might be one of the best of the year for me. I like everything about this. So Unorthodox for me gets an A. All right, so up next we're going to go to the Big Show Show. This is a family sitcom complete with multi-camera and laugh track. The Big Show, if you don't know, is a WWE superstar. I don't watch a lot of WWE, and when I say not a lot, it's been since it was called the WWF that I really kept up with it back in my youth. But The Big Show I know because he was a guest on Conan maybe 8 or 10 years ago, and I was like, wow, this guy is really funny. He tells interesting stories. And I guess he's probably still wrestling on occasion. I mean, so is, John Cena every now and then. So it's like, do they ever really leave? He is currently signed to WWE. Da, 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 da. All right, so I guess he is still a WWE performer. But he's called The Big Show partially because he is enormous. He is 7 foot. He's almost 400 pounds. Dude is big. So they have given him his own family-style sitcom called The Big Show Show. And the main component here is he's got 3 daughters, 2 from his current wife and 1 from a former relationship, and she's the oldest. And in the first episode, she comes home to stay with her dad and get to know her siblings a little bit. And in the premise of this show, Big Show has retired from the WWE, so he's now going to be more of an hands-on father, a stay-at-home father, that sort of thing. So that's the essential premise of the show and sort of the first episode anyway. This show to me is very, very reminiscent of the old TGIF shows on ABC. It's a lot like Step by Step or Full House or Family Matters, which is to say that it's very clean. You can certainly watch it with your family, but also not very funny. Like, I've never really liked those shows. Even when I was a kid, people that know me know that I never liked Full House. It's always been very, like, corny, very hokey, and you'll get that with this. And there are, varying degrees of those types of shows. Like, I would say Home Improvement is that type of show, too. And I never really liked Home Improvement either, but at least it's a little more envelope pushing or whatever. But here we see a lot of sort of tired gags, tired jokes. It also reminds me not just of TJF, but like Disney Channel original shows that are for, older kids and their parents, like kids between, 8 and 12 maybe, the tweens, I suppose. So I didn't really laugh at anything in this show. The laugh track didn't help me in that regard. But I do like a lot of those older type shows. I don't like the TGIFs, but like, Hannah Montana I always thought was real funny, and That's So Raven is funny. Here, I think he is charismatic, and I think he's a good actor. I mean, you kind of have to be if you're on the WWE. That is basically acting. So I think he did a good job, in playing himself, in the sitcom, but the kids sort of go back and forth with me from getting on my nerves and not. The youngest daughter, I started out really like hating her character and thinking, okay, she's really annoying, little kids don't say these kind of things. But then by the end, she was actually my favorite of the 3 girls. I think they gave her the biggest laugh lines, although she's probably the worst actress of the 3, although I don't know. Her timing's okay. It's a little hard to tell. Everything's kind of hard to tell with this show because I don't generally like this type of show, but it certainly wasn't funny. Like, I can find, lines and setups and storylines to be humorous in these kinds of shows. But yeah, like, to me, I prefer more a Boy Meets World than a Step by Step. So I think Big Show does a good job. I think the kids are a little hit or miss. The wife is generic as always. They usually have a totally generic wife in these kind of shows, according to Jim. Home Improvement's a great example. I like Patricia Richardson. No, is that her name? I think that's her name, Patricia Richardson. I liked her, but she was the straight woman on the show. She didn't really get a lot of laughs, So I think this show will be great for families that are struggling to find something to sit down with. I do think there is some kind of a need for that we've really gotten away from. especially with the advent of things like Netflix where there really are no censors. But this thing has been in the top 10 daily on Netflix since it came out a week ago. So obviously people are watching it. They're looking for family humor. I think you could probably do worse because at least Big Show is a charismatic frontman. I think the writing needs to certainly be better. But I think there's other family options out there that are probably worse than this. I think kids probably will find this funnier than I did, especially young girls, I would say, since it's three daughters on the show. But I leave the Big Show with a C. I think it's all right, but just not really for me. Brews Brothers is next. That is on Netflix as well. This is a single camera comedy, which means there is no live studio audience, no laugh track. And here we essentially have two brothers, Wilhelm and Adam, played by Adam Eisenberg, I guess, and Mike Castle, respectively, and they have opened up a brewery. They have this sort of back and forth relationship where they've always sort of been in competition with each other, even though they've been brewing beer together since they were way too young to drink beer. But we learned that Adam was kicked out of Portland and kicked out of Oregon completely because he was lacing his product with drugs, and so they kicked him out. I don't know why they didn't arrest him. That wasn't really explored here, but anyway, so he goes to his brother's place and is like, "Hey, guess what? I gotta stay here now. I'm gonna run the brewery with you." We learned through the episode that the brewery is 3 months in arrears for rent, so they're about to get shut down. And who else do we have? We have two other people that work there. Sarah, who is played by Carmen Flood, who is a former MMA fighter, and she is now working for them. And then Marquise Ray as Chewy, who is just basically an employee of theirs, sort of a beer tester and all that sort of thing. And then there's some other characters as well. There's these guys that run a food truck that are hippies and run their food truck half naked and on the toilet and whatever. This show is desperately trying to be two different things. It's trying to be Always Sunny in Philadelphia for sure, and that's made clear by the whole bar brewery idea. But then it's also trying to be The League a good bit, I think. And it's from one or two of the producers of The League, so that makes sense. None of these characters are particularly likable. Like a lot of these shows lately, Always Sunny and The League are certainly, I think, two that fit that mold. And as such, you can't really get behind any of them. And the difference, I think, with Always Sunny and this, or even Seinfeld, like nobody was really likable in Seinfeld, is that the jokes are, they're coming like fast and furiously. They're, a couple jokes a minute here. And with this show, you didn't get that. I mean, I laughed, I think, twice. And it wasn't even really at any of the main characters. It was mostly at the food truck people, I think, in both cases. Chewy is kind of funny too, actually. I guess I laughed once at a line he had. I think there's possibly some potential for this show, but they need to sort of get themselves out of the shadow of some of these other great shows. And even like the setups to the punchlines or the snide comments, Adam is this like pretentious brother, and he's very, very much like Dennis on Always Sunny, like thinking he's better than everybody else, and so you've got these archetypes, and the fact that it's three guys and a girl that are running and working at this brewery, that doesn't help the Always Sunny comparison either. Always Sunny is truly one of the great shows of my adult life. I mean, it's been on now for 15 years, I think. It's been great since the beginning. And so, they could have had these people in a different setting, and maybe I would not have made that comparison so easily, but it's impossible not to, because they're at a bar. And just, these characters are too unlikable yet to do anything with. They're not funny enough. They're not given funny enough lines, and maybe it's some of their comic timing as well. I don't know. So I see potential in this show, but unless I hear somebody, tell me like, oh, hey, that Brews Brothers is really funny, I don't think I'll revisit it. It's one of those where it's like there might be potential here, but there might also not be any potential here. I don't know. I can't tell yet. But I didn't think it was that funny, and they really need to sharpen up a lot of the show. Really, even just the very generic premise of like, oh, we're gonna be out of business. It's like Always Sunny has been doing those plot lines for years. So Brews Brothers for me gets a C minus on Netflix. So not too many good this week except for Orthodox or Unorthodox, I should say. But let's hear about Ollie's Pack. This is a show airing daily on Nickelodeon, and I'm not sure if it was supposed to be daily or not, or if Nickelodeon just kind of bumped it up because of the pandemic virus and kids are home with nothing to do. But these shows each average about 500,000 viewers every day, so obviously it's doing something right. So Ollie's Pack, it's basically Ollie, and he is the chosen one, and he saves the world from monsters, or saves monsters from the world. I don't know. It's a very unclear premise. We learn about it in the theme song, but that's it. There's nothing in the episode. They're not even battling monsters. There's a monster in the one episode, but he's his buddy, and everybody can see him, and they know he's a monster. Here's my main problem with this show. Okay, so as you can tell, I think the premise is very unclear. It sings to you what the premise is in the theme song, and I even watched the theme song twice because I'm like, all right, none of this stuff happened in the episode, so I'm not exactly sure I get what's going on. So I'm going to watch the theme song again. I still don't fully get it, but either way, there's no origin here. Like we don't know how he became the chosen one. We don't know why he's got a backpack. We don't know what the backpack's powers are. We don't know anything. So the first episode, it's in typical Nickelodeon fashion. It's 2 15-minute segments to make up the episode. We just don't know who is this kid. Why was he the chosen one? What is the powers of the pack? Where did he get the pack from? Like we don't know. There's no background at all. So it just becomes a very, very generic, kiddie cartoon with a kid and his weird friend, which we've seen, since the beginning of time, hundreds of different ways. I mean, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends is one that comes to mind. But even It's Pony, where, she gets a pony and that's like her pet, that premise we got right away, and it's involved in every single episode. Like the second episode was like another chosen one comes down. Okay, well, we don't even know why he's the chosen one. So that's one of the glaring issues. Another is that the monster we do see in the first episode, whoever is voicing him is trying to do a Peter Griffin impression, I think, because it's if you close your eyes, you would think it was Peter Griffin. He doesn't do the laugh, but he does everything else. He's basically trying to do a Peter Griffin impression. So that turned me off right away because I already don't like Family Guy. So, okay. But then, 2 is just unoriginal. I laughed a few times, I have to admit. I mean, it's got some okay humor, but there's literally nothing that sets this show apart from anything else, except it kind of would in its premise, but the premise is not present, at least in the first episode. So, I don't understand why, okay, fine, you sang me the premise in the theme song, so I sort of get it a little bit, but if you're not showing it to me, then the premise isn't really part of the show. So it just is very weird. I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And the whole Peter Griffin thing was annoying. I didn't think any of the voice characters were really that energetic or charismatic. I mean, the kid that voices Ollie is okay. He's a little full of himself as a character, but that's all right. Like, I didn't mind that. You'll get that in kid shows. But I just wish they would do something with this premise that they supposedly have. Because they clearly didn't. But it is kind of funny. But that's really the best I can say for it. So of all the Nickelodeon and Disney shows that I've talked about since the inception of this review show about a year ago, 8 months ago, I suppose, this is, I think, the worst, unless there's one I'm forgetting. Like, there's, Elena the Detective, and It's Pony, and there was one on Oh well, the Blues Clues revival, that was good. But yeah, this is easily the worst of the bunch so far. I'm gonna leave Ollie's Pack with a C minus. If you have a premise, do something with it. Otherwise, there's nothing separating you from every other show that we already know and love. So, yeah, not a good run this week. I would say Unorthodox is really the only one worth watching. It's the only one I will keep up with, I think. I think for families, the Big Show is probably all right. I would grade some of those other shows I mentioned, like Family Matters and Step by Step, very harshly as well. Speaking of Family Matters, apparently Jaleel White, who played Urkel in Family Matters, is going to be in the Big Show as a recurring character. He didn't show up in the first episode, though, but he's on the recurring cast list. So I always like seeing him as an adult doing different things. But so for families, maybe that's a good one. I don't think it's a particularly well-made show, but families will certainly probably enjoy it. But yeah, that's it. So I'm trying to keep these under about 40-45 minutes, so I definitely knocked it out this week. I just finished recording a Zoom video with my buddy Tim for Dan Does Disney. We're gonna keep the Disney movies going with the reviews. But I haven't yet, tried a Zoom review yet, so hopefully the audio and the video is good. I'm going to, I think, try and put that up tomorrow for our daily quarantine video. These quarantine videos are getting harder and harder because sometimes I don't know when a show is on or not. Like last night, there was no Masked Singer episode. Well, there was, but it was like a sing-along best of kind of thing. There wasn't a new episode, so I put a Weeds season 1 episode that I had sort of waiting in the wings. So I put that up. But if this Zoom thing works out and I'm able to do some Zoom videos with guests on the show, that would be so cool. So look for the Dan Does Disney with Tim tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the World War II propaganda film Victory Through Air Power. It's very interesting, and we had a really good discussion about it, so that will be up tomorrow. But in the meantime, we'll be back next week with another TV news and reviews. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.